Welcome back to the Tears of Fire podcast, a podcast where I go over the last Dragon Chronicles by Chris DeLacy. I started the podcast because I wanted to interact with the series after reading it well over a decade and a half ago. I couldn't find any podcasts or audiobooks. I found one video on YouTube that was over a decade old and only about 7 minutes long, so I figured why not create it myself. Today, we're going to be going over the prologue as well as chapters 1 through 3 of Dark Fire. And I'm joined by special guest, Mr. Mike Schubert. Mike, would you like to say
Hello.
hi?
Yes, of course. Hi, I'm happy to be back. I'm happy to be here. It was fun to dive back into this world and just read some names. And I was like, oh no, David. So it was fun to be here in like a time jump situation from the last time I was on. But yeah, stoked to be back.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Yeah, there's been a lot that's happened in the book and a half since you've had your last appearance.
Yeah.
So, just for a quick recap for the audience, last time Mike was on, he jumped in about, I'd say, halfway through book three, and he was completely blind. He came in, and it was, I would call it a blind reaction. If people watch those on YouTube, how, sometimes they'll watch a movie or a show, and you're kind of sitting there right along with them. I thought it was fun. Trying to be spoiler free here, but just to catch everybody up where Mike was at last time, we had just gone over the part where David was making his new dragon, Golly Gosh, kind of in that area of chapters. And since then, we had gotten to the. Ooh, actually, Mike, why don't you tell me what do you remember from when the last time you were on?
So yeah, I remembered like some of the things that came up, like learning about the like. I feel like it mimicked this similarly, where like there was a beginning chapter about more of the humans not interacting with the dragons, and there was like the Arctic Inuit polar bear side of things was started off. I believe there was like someone's brother was either died or was betrayed. I feel like there was
I
something
want
with
to say,
someone.
was it probably Tutega? Was that his name?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, because that name came up in the prologue, and I was like, oh, I remember that name. So that was going on, and then we went to the David story with Golly Gosh, and that was like the first dragon that he had sculpted, I believe.
Yes.
Okay, and then I remembered Gadzooks, who does come up in these chapters we're doing, being mentioned. I can't remember if that was just like someone we already knew or was interacting with David, but I was like, I remember this guy for sure. And then there was definitely the talk of like the bigger picture stuff. So Gawain was mentioned, and that lore all felt familiar to me when I was reading these opening chapters. And yeah, so I feel like it was mostly around the Golly Gosh of it all. But I got enough of the like big picture stuff from then that when I was reading the stuff here, it was fun to be reading initial chapters because it's something I cover on my Percy Jackson podcast, The News Olympian. Like, what if someone jumps in and not knowing stuff? And it was fun to read those chapters being someone who doesn't know as much. So it's like they're doing the big world building, catch you up stuff. And some things I was like, oh, that's new. And other things I was like, oh, yeah, I remember this from last time.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Is that it's awesome at this very beginning, chapter one, right after the prologue that we'll get into a little bit later. But with Lucy's Journal, it does a pretty good job of that, just kind of giving you a quick review on most of the series and kind of giving you a what's what and helping you kind of ease yourself into the story. Uh, but before we start off, let me catch you back up. So, what had happened the rest of the way in Firestar? David obviously had a big conflict up in the Arctic. They had been going back and forth between Wayward Crescent, which is in Massachusetts here in the US, where Liz and Lucy live and have the Pennacuddle household, as well as the Dragon Den, where they create the dragons. And they were trying to bring back Gwaine, Auntie Gwyneth or Gwilana, who is the evil civil, had kidnapped Lucy at one point, taken her over to the Tooth of Ragnar, which was the origin point of this whole thing. When Gwaine shed his fire tear, Guinevere caught it, released it out into the ocean, and that created the ice cap in this world's lore. And then the fire tier was essentially just kept in its all of its umma, which is their life force and essence, essentially in the story. And they were able to, how would you say this, garner power and different abilities by using this ice fire. Liz, who creates the dragons, sprinkles the ice fire on the dragons to keep them alive. And then during this time, the dragon that was made at the end of the second book, Grockle, was able to come alive using some of Liz's hair as well as the power from the Fane.
Mhm.
Did you hear anything about the Fane last time we were reading?
I don't think last time, but it was mentioned in like the Lucy journal opening chapter.
Perfect, perfect. All right, so just a quick description. What they are is more of a thought being. They don't have a physical body, but they're able to essentially invade your mind in not necessarily mind control, but they can influence you strongly, which leads you to their bidding.
Okay.
Uh, there's the good faction of it, which is just called the Fane, and then the bad faction of it called the Ix. At one point, they were together, and their whole goal was to breed dragons. They would use this world and this realm as the breeding grounds, and then once the dragons became of proper age, they would take them into what they call Chimera, spelled kind of weird though, Ki, and then the apostrophe Meria.
Okay.
And so that's their realm. And then they have to commingle when they interact with anything, whether it's an animal, the cats, dragons, humans. They commingle, and when they commingle with the dragon, they become enlightened, and they call that the illumination.
Okay.
So that is the goal for the dragons all together to get to Chimera and then live in this alternate dimension. The end of Firestar, David stops the Ix, the bad faction of the Fane, and essentially takes them out with the partnership of Ingvar, the polar bear. Now, that brings us to the end of Fire. Well, actually, I should probably say that technically both Ingvar and David pass away in this conflict. Ingvar is killed by the dragon Grockle before he goes into Chimera, and then David is slain by the Fane who was controlling Totega at the time,
Oh
actually.
no.
Yeah, it
Ooh.
was very sad, and Totega unfortunately falls down through the ice and drowns with his pack of dogs. David gets speared through the heart with ice, and that's explained how he's able to come back since the ice fire is the essence of Gwaine. The ice essentially melted into David's body and gave him powers.
Interesting. Okay. Super David.
Yeah, exactly, Super David. And then so this last book, The Fire Eternal, that was between these two, was kind of more of, I would say, I mean, obviously each book is a bridge to the next one, but I would say just like a filler episode, if we're going based on like TV or a show or something, is the best way I could describe it. Kind of catching up on the actions between Liz and Xana, his new daughter Alexa, and there was a 5 year time jump. And so, luckily, I'm sure you had read that in this book, Darkfire, it takes place only 2 days after the fire.
Yes. Yeah, I noticed that.
All right. Well, thank you for joining me. Appreciate it. With
Mm-hmm.
that, let's get into the show.
Yeah.
All right. So, we're going to get into prologue. The title is Seal Point near the Inuit village of Savalik. This prologue starts off kind of dark, in my opinion, for
Mm-hmm.
a children's book.
Yes.
And what we're starting off with is Christopher Apoc. He is Tutega's brother that we had met back in Firestar,
Mm-hmm.
actually. And his grandfather, the shaman and the leader of this village, is in a sickly way. He had been declining for a few weeks during this conflict of the end of Fire Eternal when the fog and the mist had set over the Arctic, kind of concealing um, the bears and the dragons returning because they didn't want everything to be broadcasted out. The grandfather had gotten sick around this time. Everybody was seeing bad omens, and they all kind of accepted his fate, the grandfather's fate as soon as he started putting away his trinkets and what he used to communicate with the spirits. In the north, they had kind of gotten rid of the old traditions to let the elders go by way of being carried behind a sled and kind of falling off the ice. But everybody respected. I've been calling him Tally. His full name is Tally Ruktuk, is the best way that I can pronounce it.
Sure.
Uh, but Tally, everybody respects, and so they are going to allow him to be taken by the spirits of the north and taken by the ice. So Chris is getting ready with the snowmobile, and he's very wary. There's been talk all around this village that there's been no real signs of any bears, but he's still loading up a gun to make sure that he's safe. And then when they start off, it's very, very slow. They said that usually this is tradition to go at a duck's pace as to respect the elders and make sure that they can take off when they're ready. They say that they just roll off whenever the elders decide that they've been far enough. There's no one to say goodbye though. I thought that was kind of sad. I guess that's tradition as well, where they just go off without any kind of, or they start their journey without any kind of send off from the family or the village, which I would find is very strange, especially for a shaman and a leader of a village that had been there for so long.
Yeah, I guess it just kind of felt like when I was reading it, they make reference to trying to like mimic the way in which their ancestors passed, which was just like since you were out and hunting, foraging, it just kind of seemed like people just like died in the midst of travel, and it felt like trying to pay homage to that. So maybe their whole thing is the people before us didn't get big pomp and circumstances around when they died. They're going, it was their time, it was their time. So maybe they're trying to harken back to that. But yeah, man, if I'm going out, I want a huge goodbye thing. Like I give me the big funeral before, because that's the saddest thing about your funerals. You don't get to attend it, and like if I know I'm gonna be gone, I'm inviting the whole town, and we're gonna do a big celebration of life, and then I'll be like, I'm out of here. I'm gonna go, fall off a snowmobile. Catch you guys later.
Yeah, and what's sad too is he said that he was in extreme decline and he hadn't been eating very well.
Hmm.
He pretty much rejected any form of comfort. But like you just said, if I know that it's my time and I'm deciding to go out on my own terms, I would at least want one last good meal.
Yeah, my wife's grandma was a pro with this. She basically got to her mid 90s and she kept beating the estimates for like she has this much time to live. Like she just kept going and going, which was awesome. At a certain point, she was just like, I'm only eating milkshakes, guys. Like I'm at the end.
Yeah,
I don't care. She had like exclusively milkshakes for like months. It was incredible. Like what a power move.
she probably lived for like another year or so after that
I
too,
think
huh?
I honestly like obviously not a doctor. I try to eat very healthy, but I feel like there's got to be at that stage like your happiness has to be like a major factor in keeping you going. And I think she was in such a good mood that it just kept it going. So shout out to grandma.
Yeah, that helps a lot. All right, so they start this journey and they get pretty far. It says that with the snowmobile hooked up to the sled carrying Grandpa, they get about 2 to 3 miles away from the village before they start hitting the mist. And then once the mist kind of envelops them, Christopher Apoc gets a feeling that the mist is actually what killed the snowmobile. They're dead in the tracks. He's trying to start it up. He's kicking it. He's slapping it, making sure that the fuel gauge is ready, but they've got more than half a tank, so it shouldn't be dead. And when he turns around, Grandfather Tolly is completely gone. He's starting to worry. He gets up, he's yelling, and then during this time, he finds him. He sees that his grandfather's in a trance, doing this kind of hymn or a chant, almost to the spirits of the north. During this time, there comes a great wind from the south, is what it's described, and from a great bird. I guess one thing I did forget to mention earlier is that during this time when Grandfather Tolly was starting to get weak, he did try to summon the spirits of the polar bears. They were beating a drum up at the point of the tallest mountain over there, and he predicted the return of a bird, that the earth was more like an egg that was given to by a giant birdess and it's come back to its nest. So, with that being said, we come back to the wind from the great south that Christopher was feeling,
Mhm.
and down comes what he described as a giant bird that stood 5 times taller than any polar bear he'd ever seen. When this giant bird interacts with Grandpa, there's no fire being spit, there's no ice being dragged anywhere. Simply his eyes light up. It's described as having almost a pit bull or dog face. Its eyes were bright violet, and then the eyes shone to the center of Grandfather Tolly's palms, and his spirit, Christopher was able to see fully lifted out of his body and almost shattered, is what I kind of got from it. I'm not sure if the dragon absorbed it or just sent it up to whatever heavens that they believe in this story. But so grandfather was no more. And then after this, during this time, Chris was freaking out as anybody would,
I mean,
seeing a
yeah,
ginormous dragon.
totally, totally. And I was also surprised just because from what I knew of the story, I was like, wait a second, I thought the dragons in this book were small. What's going on? So I too was like, this is very different. Ooh.
Yeah, well, at the very end, the last 2 pages of the Fire Eternal, the previous book, that was when dragons were reintroduced. But this is the first time we're seeing one out in nature, I should say. We'd seen
Okay.
like visions and what would you call them, projections per se, up until this point, just to get the reference sizes. But yeah, this is the first one that we've seen that's live and in action per se for the book. But so Chris doesn't really know what to do. He's trying to shoot his gun. His gun's not working either. After Grandpa is gone, the dragon flaps its wings another time, sending Chris not necessarily flying, but I'd say sliding back several feet on the ice.
Yeah.
He pees himself.
I
He's
love
scared.
that note. I thought that was great. Like it was because it was just like in a laundry list of things. It was it was like he was knocked over. This was going on. His jacket with blah blah blah. There was there was a pile of pee on his thigh. I was like, this is great. It
And
took me by
especially for it to
surprise in a
be
fun way.
iced over, man, that would be
Yes.
so
Oh,
uncomfortable.
and so embarrassing. Like, at least if you've ever had a situation, sometimes if you've peed yourself, you at least have the chance of like it drying out before anybody can tell. But if it is just absolutely frozen to your leg, it's like game over, man. Everyone's going to know what happened. And then I'm
Yeah.
sure it's got to be incredibly uncomfortable. Like, that can't be nice. It's got to suck.
Yeah, I have an uncle that I work with over in construction, and he's told me it comes for everybody. Everybody has some kind of accident, so be
Like
nice, you know?
it's always, you never know, it's always going to happen, or it's like it's always a chance of happening. I haven't had anything in my adult life. I've had two like really bad close calls of like being in situations where I needed to use the restroom, and the restroom I was planning on using was not available, whether it was like closed for maintenance or it was Google Maps told me there was a public restroom here and it turns out that there wasn't one. I've had two like really close ones. Thankfully nothing's bad happened, but they were so close that I was like, if I ever saw someone not be fortunate that I like was able to find two like last minute bathrooms, I would never judge anyone because I was seconds away both times from being in a really bad spot.
Yeah, yeah. I recently moved in, my girlfriend and her little boy, and right before that, when we first started getting together, I started carrying a pair of just emergency clothes for
Yeah.
everyone in
Oh,
the car just in case.
especially with a kid, yeah, like we got to do that. We started when we were flying with our little one. We would always of course have emergency clothes for her, but then at one point it was like, wait a second. Any because there was like had like a little bit of a blowout and I got on my sweatpants on the plane, which like wasn't a huge deal, but I was like, oh, if this was much worse or a longer flight, we would need like we got everybody needs extra clothes because the mess can get anywhere.
Yeah, spreads
So-
to everyone. Yeah,
right.
yeah. Nobody's safe.
Yeah, so now very intentionally where it's like, all right, what's anything that's coming like on the plane, like in the overhead or under the seat, it's like we got to change of clothes for everyone. And like Kelly and I sometimes will intentionally just bring like, let's just bring one of my t-shirts or something that we could both that either of us would be fine with wearing. Like this not gonna get on both of us, right? I don't know, maybe we're tempting fate.
Yeah, it's one of those where you get the tourist T-shirts real quick from the gift shop, and then just
Right.
wear that for the rest of the day.
Yeah, you land in Seattle, you get the one that has the space needle and in the middle of the skyline, which is absolutely incorrect. Ugh, tisk tisk.
I've only been to Seattle like twice in my life, and it was when I was very young, so it'd be
It's a
nice to
good
go back.
town. I love it a lot, but I always laugh at the gift shop shirts because they put the Space Needle, which is nowhere near the downtown skyline, right in the middle of downtown, baby.
Yeah. All right, so after this happens, Chris is pretty nervous. He hops back onto the snowmobile because while this was going on, the mist was starting to clear, not necessarily clear, but from the wings being spitting up all that snow and everything, the snowmobile randomly just turns back on. He
Mhm.
jumps on it. He only stops twice. He stops the first time to respect his grandfather, and then the second time to grab the gun, and he hurries back home to tell his story. And
Props to
then
him for stopping for the respecting of grandfather. I feel like if I was in that situation, I'd be doing it on the move. Like I'd be actively driving and being like, "Shout out, Grandpa! I love you.
yeah, give a good salute. Yeah.
We had a good run. Bye."
And then we get this name of the dragon to be Goreel.
Yeah.
And then it also described it as an ice dragon. So then a question that I wrote here in my notes is what types are there to still be seen? I
Mm.
was wondering that because like with the dragons that Liz creates, the little clay ones, obviously they have their own little abilities, but I thought that was something special to Liz. So can these real dragons, like if there's an ice dragon, um, is there a dragon that's an earth dragon? Is there a dragon that is kind of like Golly Gosh, where they can have the ability to heal? That brought that up to me. But
Yeah, I had the
reading
same
this
question.
prologue, oh, sorry.
More. I had the same question, just more from like I didn't with the world because yeah, the way they say ice dragon, I was like, oh, this is said as if there is also fire dragon, wind dragon, whatever dragon. So yeah, I was similarly intrigued by him being clocked as a certain type of dragon.
Yeah, 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 exactly. All right, and that brings us to the end of the prologue. But before we move on, Mike, do you have any thoughts or questions?
Not really. I feel like we kind of checked all those boxes. I'm excited to get into the proper story.
Well, with that being said, let's get right into it. Part one, Wayward Crescent, Chapter one, Lucy's Journal. And what we were kind of talking about at the beginning of the episode is that this is the part where the author, Crystal Lacey, is kind of speaking through a character to catch you up if you kind of start this
Yeah.
series randomly. And I wouldn't suggest it, but in book five of a seven
Yeah.
book series.
But look, I'm having a good time. So if you're like me, folks, don't sweat it.
If you hadn't read, I know you've only read four chapters of book
Hmm.
three randomly in the middle of it.
Hmm.
But if you hadn't and you'd opened up this right here,
Yeah.
how would you feel reading just the prologue and Lucy's first chapter? Do you think you could understand and grasp what's going on?
I think I would grasp enough to like know what's happening in the story here. It would feel like I was reading a like middle of the story tale, but I feel like sometimes when I don't know, even if you watch like a one-off sci-fi movie or something, like sometimes you're in the middle of the story and then you're like, okay, and you're trying to like piece together through context clues what's going on. So I recognized from reading it, okay, there's other things I don't know. That being said, the book still kind of like caught me up to speed at any point. Like there was, like they introduced David, and because I knew more about David, it was like, okay, the book is telling me all I need to know for the context of how he's being referred to here. But like clearly there's more David stuff. And I feel like I would have been keyed into that even if I hadn't been familiar with him from my previous time on the show.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. So, with that being said, Lucy is using this journal to figure out what's going on with her and who she really is. She's confused because she writes that she looks like a girl, talks like a girl, walks like a girl, but she's not human. She came from an egg. I
Hmm.
This kind of confused me because we've known that for a long time, at least as the book readers. In book two, that's the way that this line of Guinevere, meaning Liz and her descendants, all have children. They create an egg out of clay. It has to be quickened by a sibyl or somebody with unnatural powers, and then they're hatched. If it's a female, they can only be human form. If it's a male, there's a possibility of it being a dragon.
Mm.
And that's how we got Grockle. Is that egg was quickened by Xana, and it ended up being a boy. But so Lucy is writing that she's kind of confused. She doesn't know who she is or what she has to do. And then she's going on to, like I was saying with Mike, kind of review and catch us up. A couple of notes here that I have just within myself since I know most of the story is that Guinevere had the power to self replicate. Uh,
Yeah.
now, I know that obviously, like we were saying, their children are created by molding the clay. In my head, I guess I just assumed it's like us, where obviously most of us are going to look or have features of our parents that came before us, but with self-replication, are they just carbon copies? If
Yeah.
I took
I was wondering
Liz,
that as well.
yeah, yeah, if I took Liz, is she going to look exactly like Guinevere from over 900 years ago? Another note I have in here is that it's only 2 days from the end of book four. Lucy referenced that David had showed up to see Xana and his daughter Alexa in the garden. She herself hasn't seen him, but we do know at the end of book four, The Fire Eternal, David had shown up to Liz as well. So no, at this point, I believe we'll get into the next chapter where David visited somebody else as well. But the only people that David has appeared to have been Lucy and Arthur. Um, Also, one thing I should probably mention is at the end of Firestar, when David and Ingvar both passed away, the polar bears sat in each of the four cardinal directions, did some kind of weird chanting, and sent them both into the ice. And David came back at the very well, we didn't get the reveal until about halfway through the Fire Eternal, but David came back with the ability as Bergstrom. I don't know if you read much about Bergstrom from the last time or not.
No, that's a new name to me.
Okay, gotcha. So Bergstrom was a shaman from the Inuit. He was actually Nordic, but he spent a lot of his time with the same village actually that Tutega and Christopher are from. And he became a shaman in his own right with the ability to transform into a bear, and David
Okay.
took up that role. So now David is part bear, part human, and then because he was spared through the chest with the ice fire, he has a part of Gwaine in him. So he's just this.
Super David. Let's go. Leveling up.
He is the Frankenstein of Super David for sure. But that's why he's got this supernatural feel around him and can kind of show up whenever and wherever and appear almost out of thin air. I don't get
Sure.
teleportation, but almost like rides the wind kind of a thing. Lucy also informs us that Gadzuk shows up to an old friend of Arthur, a professor that's in Cambridge. He said that a little figurine, or I guess he didn't say figurine, he said a creature about the size of a bird flew into his thing and he has questions that he needs to be asked. But that pretty much brings up the end of that chapter, or at least my notes for it. Mike, do you have any thoughts or questions?
No, that was all. I feel like it was short, sweet, and kind of got us ready to get into the tale of this book.
Yeah. All right. We're going to get into chapter two, Road to Cambridge. This one starts off, I was kind of confused, but we find out that they're just listening to the radio. The
Yes.
voice that is narrating the beginning of this chapter is talking about what's going on in the Arctic, how no one has seen the bears. There's still this mist over it that's messing with everybody's instruments. There was I want to say Russian, maybe it's not Russian, but a submarine that got lost trying to navigate under the ice cap itself. The boat that news reporter is on itself won't get within a mile of it because then their own instruments start getting messed up. But everybody's confused because they can't see what's going on inside. But there's no other disturbances. There's no tornadoes. There's no earthquakes. There's no other environmental phenomenons going on. So they're all trying to figure out what's going on. Lucy's getting upset and asks for the radio to be turned off. This starts a conversation between Liz, Lucy, and Arthur about who they are. Lucy opens up and tells them that she's starting to write in this journal. And then Arthur says that three heads are better than one. And then we get a little her from the dragon, and he corrects himself. Okay, sorry, four. They are also joined by Lucy's dragon Gwendolyn, who is the IT dragon. She loves a bunch of praise. They tell her that she's the best GPS in the world. Even though she doesn't quite understand what that is, she feels good about it. We get a little bit further into this section, and Arthur is trying to maybe, I would say, make Lucy feel a little bit better and give some insight. And he says that David came to visit him at his lecture yesterday, and that David will appear to everyone on his own time. And so let me ask you, Mike, if you had a character, because obviously Lucy grew up with David when she was 10, and on her 11th birthday is when the story started out, giving him, or he gave her, the Nut Beast, which is a story that he wrote, and then he wrote another second book. How would you feel if you got extremely bonded with this one person and he started appearing once he came back? You didn't know if he was dead or alive for 5 years. And when it's finally confirmed that he is, he starts appearing to everyone except for you. How would that make you feel?
Oh, I'd feel so left out. I'd feel incredibly left out. I think FOMO in general is something that I really struggle with still to this day and have for all of my life. Ever since seventh grade, once I went to a small K through 8 school where it was like 60 kids in the class. So up until that point, when a kid would have a birthday party, you would just invite the whole grade. And then starting in seventh grade, it was like, oh, we're having smaller parties where not everyone gets invited. Once that happened and I didn't get invited to some, oh, so yeah, if there was someone coming that I had any sort of history with that was going back and forth to everybody except for me, I'd feel so left out. This happens to me sometimes. This is like it happens with New York City, but like a good thing is that a lot of my friends will visit and I'll get to see them. Sometimes, though, what does happen is someone posts on their Instagram story that they did a weekend in New York. And I was like, oh, cool. You didn't text me. And I feel this way if it's someone I'm close to or someone that I like had one class with in college one time. So I know it is a me problem. So all this to say, yeah, I'd feel super left out and very upset.
That's tough because I mean, being in New York, there's so much to do that you can go a whole weekend
That's the
without.
thing. I try not to like actually get upset by it, but what I much prefer is when people like reach out and they'll be like, hey, I'm coming to New York this weekend. I am so busy, but like blah blah blah. That's fine. Like I will never besmirch anyone for not having time to see me. But like if we're on, you know, texting or at least like chatting a bit on social media terms and you haven't hit me up, like that's weird. But I understand there's so much to do. Even when close friends visit, sometimes it just doesn't line up.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. All right, so Arthur also goes on to say that he believes Alexa has a big part to do in all of this. That since Alexa and David are both Fane, Alexa had a lot more influence. She's the one that helped him write David into existence. So we know that David obviously had the ability to write things into the happening. At first, he started with only a few seconds ahead. As his abilities grew, he could get about a week ahead. And I had always wondered where these abilities had come from, since it seemed that David was just some normal Joe that showed up one day needing a
Hmm.
place to stay to go to college. But we found out in Firestar and got a lot more backstory in the Fire Eternal that Arthur, when he was. Okay, here, I should probably explain this.
Hmm.
So, Arthur and Liz used to be together a long time ago. I want to say about 20 years previously, before all this started going on. And then Liz started, what would you call it, brooding and getting ready to have a child, per se. And that's when Auntie Gwyneth or Guilana showed up. And Guilana started driving them apart. And when this all happened, Liz had created an egg which Lucy had come from, and then she had the baby and Guilana had pretty much shut her off, locked her in a room. Arthur wasn't able to see her for like pretty much 2 weeks. So Arthur was freaking out. He tried to convince Guilana that he was the right one, that he'll do everything correct. He got a ring to propose to her and say that I'll marry her, I'll do anything. And then once he busted into the room and he saw her holding a child that he never had any knowledge of, he got pretty upset. Guilana told him to leave, and he spent the next 15 years at a monastery in Farlow Island, which I believe they had placed in Scotland. So
Wow.
he like took off and was gone for a long time.
Yeah.
With that being said, when he was on the island, on one of the towers in the monastery. He found a claw from Gwaine, and then using the ichor from it was able to write, and then that was dragon magic explained. He was able to have the same abilities as David, write things into existence. And so he said that Alexa used her influence through the Fane energy or the Fane magic to have him write her a father, create this man that was essentially just a husk that the Fane could take the body into. Arthur explains that he wrote the way that David responds, the way that David can walk, the way that David would look like, but he didn't create David as a whole. And that Alexa, even though she acts like a child, it's because that's what she wanted as a Fane, was to experience a human life all the way through. As they get closer, Liz is pulling into Cambridge, and Professor Steiner met them out at the road. As soon as he sees Gwendolyn in the car, he's starting to ask questions if she can fly too. He's pretty mesmerized by these dragons, and he says that they need to talk. And so he's kind of waving them into the building. Liz parks, they're all getting out, but before they go into the building, Arthur gives a pretty big reveal saying that he believes everything was delayed because David was supposed to be Liz's and his child from that original point that I was talking about,
Yeah.
which made sense when I was reading about Arthur and his abilities in the last book. That's what my first connection was, like, oh, these guys have the same abilities. Are they connected somehow? I thought maybe it was a distant relative, like, oh, this is my uncle or my cousin or something, but turns out there's a little bit deeper of a connection. My other note would be here though that if that did happen, wouldn't that make David the same age as Lucy? So
Huh.
not really sure. But
Yeah.
that kind of brings us to the end of that chapter. Mike, do you have any thoughts or questions?
I don't think so, because I think anything that was like a question mark in chapter 2 gets answered in chapter 3. I think mainly the thing that I was thinking when the chapter 2 revealed happened with the, like, David was supposed to be our son. I was like, supposed to be? How does this all work? Like, I don't know. Not that I'm an expert, but I have had one child.
Yeah,
And it's like,
I know how that process works.
I was like, I don't know. This feels strange. But I think they touch on this in the next chapter, right?
Yeah, a little
Okay,
bit.
right.
All right. So then let's get right into it. Chapter 3, a message from Gadzooks. And so everybody makes it into the house. There is a strong smell of tobacco in there. I'm sure he's just smoking the whole time while he's studying and working, which has got to be gnarly, man. I can't imagine. Like, I remember when my mom would smoke cigarettes, and she would do a pretty good job, but the car was always terrible smelling. And that's
Yeah.
tough because that gets in your clothes. It's just, I don't know, forever pungent.
I'm not a fan of it. I didn't like it when I lived in Paris, just because people, like, there especially, just like lots of people smoking and stuff. So I would like go out to bars with friends, and it would just like, I had to stop wearing, like, very like cottony sweaters and stuff, because that would just like hold it in.
Yeah,
I
it just absorbs it.
I bought like a PSG soccer like tracksuit kind of jacket, because it at least was like made of, like moisture wicking material that would repel smoke. And I was just like, I'm wearing this anytime we're going out. This is absurd. And then sometimes in our building now, like if someone goes down, and even if they go out and smoke outside and come in, like the elevator will just reek of, oh, someone either just came back from smoking or whatever. And it's just like the smell of it just really, really not a fan of it. Really not a
Yeah,
fan.
it really chokes you out. Now though, whenever I smell that, it's almost like that Ratatouille scene where it just transports me back to being a child.
The memories, yeah.
Yeah. All right, but so Steiner gets into the building and he asks Arthur how long he's been blind and if it's curable. They do not tell him what exactly happened, but they say that there's no medical remedy to it. They've kind of done their due diligence, they've gone to all the doctors, but since what had happened to Arthur was more supernatural, he was blinded by the Fane themselves, I don't think there would be a cure, period. So Steiner tells his story of seeing Gadzooks. He said that he was studying, and all of a sudden his candle flickers out, and he thought it was a prank at first because when he put the light back on, there Gadzooks was in the window seal. He started looking around for maybe one of his students or somebody else that was kind of, again, playing a prank, and he didn't see anything. But he saw a flash of the dragon, which usually, if you don't have the ability to see the dragon, they're just going to appear solid to you. They're gonna look like a statue.
Mhm.
But for some that have trained eyes, when they move, it's going to look just like a blur. He's able to see it, which is crazy, and we'll get into that later into the chapter. But unless you've had training or had some kind of magic given to you, you should not have the ability to see these dragons.
Gotcha.
So it was strange that he was able to, period, and then Gadzooks interacted with him.
Mhm.
Uh, Steiner was mesmerized because this bird like creature that flew in seemed to create, or not create, but seemed to pull out utensils to write. He said a pen and a notepad. He also said that what the dragon had wrote was unlike anything he had seen in his studies. And it seems like this guy is more of a uh, historical, ancient studier. He's talking about all of his archaeological studies. He's going to Egypt. He's gone to all these old places and old dig sites, but the symbols he's never seen before. And that's why he's trying to contact Arthur, because Arthur is the most open minded, but also the most grounded person that he knows academically as well. Arthur does convince Liz to tell him that she creates the dragons. Liz holds back the information on how they're magically able to come to life, but does say that some of them are able to interact and some of them have abilities, and this blows Steiner's mind. Eventually, Lucy gets pretty impatient and is asking to see what Gadzooks wrote. She's saying that it's their dragon, so they have a right to it. And Stein doesn't seem to be that upset or care. He's pretty excited as well. And after a few more minutes of talking, he goes and pulls out an envelope that Gadzooks had written on. And on the envelope, first he hands it to Lucy. Lucy says that she can't tell what it says or if it's even a language. Arthur is asking if it could be almost like a hieroglyph, how old languages were expressed more through pictures than actual symbols, and that if you had no idea uh, of a language like Japanese, or he gave another example that they wouldn't necessarily look like characters to you if you haven't
Mhm.
done any kind of studies.
Yeah.
Liz takes a look. Oh, go ahead. Were you gonna say something?
I think what we're getting to is such a cool, interesting uh, concept that I never even considered. I'll wait till we get to the spoiler of it. But I was like, I thought this was such a fascinating thing that I've seen in other YA series that I've read. But then this is like a new version that I was like, I've never thought of that before. So it was really fun.
It's awesome. I'd love to know what that is when it comes to it, what
Mhm.
the comparison would be. But so after Lucy looks at it, she hands it to Liz, and Liz as well says that she's not sure. She's never seen this type of language, but tells that it's intentional, that there's some way that they should be able to read it. All right, this whole time, the dragon Gwendolyn had been with Lucy inside of the building as well, and Steiner was looking at her periodically and kept asking if, and he would flap his little hands if she could fly or move, if she was animated just like Gadzooks. So Liz gives her permission to move about, and especially in front of Steiner, and this just blows his mind again. But Gwendolyn is also looking at this piece of paper and the writing while the grown-ups and Lucy are talking back and forth. Gwendolyn kind of gives a quick her and a grumble. She says that she can read it, and it's apparently dragon tongue. And
Yeah.
dragon tongue is what they've been using to communicate with dragons, just period as well. Liz sings it when she's trying to put Lucy to sleep, kind of a lullaby form. So Dragon Tongue isn't necessarily new to us in the series, but it's new to us in the way of writing format. We didn't
Yeah.
know that it could be writ, just like it's here in the story.
Yeah, and that's the comparison for me. Is the most obvious one is Parcel Tongue in Harry Potter, where you have this language that people can speak, but at no point do they ever talk about it being written. And I think that that is cool in this universe where it's very clearly established, we know that there's this spoken language, and Liz even mentions like, oh, you can learn it. It's similar to Gaelic, and all that's really fun. And for even some of the people more knowledgeable of the language to know, I didn't know you could write it. And does even the dragon say like, I didn't know either, but like the way it's written is like what you do with your throat. So I thought it was cool to also have a language that is like, it's not just this letter represents this noise, but it kind of like instructs how you would say it. I just thought it was a really fun concept I had not come across in my fantasy readings thus far.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right that Gwendolyn does say that she didn't know that it could be written down either, which I guess makes sense because how would dragons write per se?
Sure.
They could probably communicate with another being, whether it's humans or maybe something of higher intelligence. It seems like these dragons are of the highest intelligence. But maybe if they could work with some monkey or something, or like I said, humans, they would be able to write down these characters, is what I'd call them. But yeah, so there's no way for them to know it, which also makes me wonder if they had never seen it written down, how did she know that that's like you were saying, the way that it's described is the strokes of the lines is how she would move her throat in order to make the correct sounds. But how would you even be able to judge that?
Right.
Because, like Arthur was saying earlier, if I was just to look at Japanese or Mandarin or, at this point, even German, I wouldn't be able to even guess on how it is. I would have to pull out Google Translate just to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, but then, so Gwendolyn says that she can translate it, and the message that Gadzooks left was scruff, or not scruffin, it's scuffinberry. Now, that brought me to, because we've got a few different names, especially with some beans that are being, beans, some living beans that are out there. Is Scuffinberry a place, or is it a living bean? I have no
Yeah.
question. I've never heard of this place either.
Yeah, for me, it was vague enough where that could easily be a location, could be a dragon, could be something else, and I think that's fun for someone reading is that at this point in time you don't know what the message means.
Well, that brings us to the end of that section. Mike, I really appreciate it. I'm going to close out this with a question. Now, there have been two big, I'm not going to call them factions because they're on the same side, but two big, I would say, icons in this story are polar bears and dragons. And last time I'd asked you about what kind of dragon that you would have and what abilities would it use. But this time I'm going to ask you, what would you prefer if you had the option like David to where you could be a shaman that can shapeshift between polar bear and human, or if you could have a dragon that has its own abilities, which one would you choose?
That is a tricky one. That's a tricky one. I feel like I would go with having a dragon with abilities because I'm a big team player, and I feel like more heads are better than one. Like I really liked the three heads are better than one, no four heads are better than one thing. So I feel like if I had an additional companion, that would be more useful than just like me myself having an additional ability. Um, and I don't know. I think it would just be so cool to have a little creature that from big to small could help me in like tiny little things, but then also if I get thrust into the major plot of of an epic tale, they could help me as well. Whereas I don't know how functional polar bear is day to day unless I was living up in a very Arctic like place. So I think in my daily life, it would be cool if I had a little dragon that could do some stuff. And if it's just small potatoes the whole time, cool, great, I got a bow. But then if things get dire, we can get on it. Whereas if I currently could turn into a polar bear right now, I don't know that I'd be utilizing this power unless I took a vacation to Alaska or something like
Yeah,
that.
100%. 100%. It'd be kind of scary too, because polar bears are one of the gnarliest predators in our real life. So I'm
Yeah.
not sure people would take kindly to it.
No, and if I was in a place with other polar bears amongst the polar bears, then I'd have to be dealing with other polar bears. I'm sure that there's people that try to hunt polar bears, and I think that though it would be tricky for having a dragon, because similarly everyone would be very fascinated and want to get their hands on it. The fact that these dragons are small and clearly have a history of doing a good job of Toy Storying it, where they pretend to be not alive for the people who don't know, I think it'd be easier to go undetected as well.
No, yeah, I totally agree. But Mike, thank you so much for joining me. I think we're going to end it here. With that being said, I'm going to put all the links into the description where you can find them. But Mike, would you like to let everybody know where you're at and what they can enjoy from you?
Sure. So the stuff that's most relevant to this show, I have an ongoing podcast right now called The Newest Olympian, where I've never read the Percy Jackson books as a kid, so it's me going through them for the very first time as an adult, and I have guests on that are big fans of the series. So we're now on to the fourth book in the sequel series, the Heroes of Olympus series, and we've covered the movies that are bad, and the TV show that's good, and the musical that's good, and everything in between. So that's The Newest Olympian, which you can listen to wherever you get podcasts. I've referenced reading Harry Potter, so the podcast I made that preceded this was Potterless. Same concept. Never read the Harry Potter books as a kid. I stopped doing that show because J.K. Rowling is terrible, but there's 200 plus episodes you can listen to that I made before she was publicly terrible. And then I have some other podcasts that are a little less subject relevant, but if you want to learn about them, you can go to my website, which is just Schub, SCHUB.es. And that's got links to the other stuff I make, my social media, all that other stuff, if you enjoyed what you heard from me.
Awesome, I appreciate it. And then I'm not sure how you're feeling about it, but I know that I will not be watching the new HBO show. So
Absolutely not. I hope it crashes and burns. I hope it is terrible. I wish nothing but ill upon the TV show. All the actors except for the children that are involved, because they don't know better. Their parents should know better. But yeah, I hope that it just crumbles and no one watches it. And anyone else, if you're considering watching it, just don't. Just don't do it. Even if you're like, oh, I'm going to pirate it. It's like, do something else. There's so many other things that are cool and not terrible. And also, it just looks bad. Like, I've avoided the
yeah,
trailer, but just from like all the promotional things that have come across my timeline against my will, it just looks not good. Like, it just looks like a copy of the movies. So, like, if you really want to do it, just like rewatch the movies. If you feel like you
exactly.
must, don't watch the new show. Just don't do it.
All right. Well, you guys, thank you for joining in. We back next week where we are going to be going over chapters 4 through 7. And yeah, I hope you guys have a safe flight out and hit no turbulence.